السلام عليكم.
Everyone here, sound is good. Sound check, anyone? Is the mic loud and
Uh,
clear?
yes, it's fine.
Yes. طيب، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Like last time, we went through the ahdath, the incidents or actions, the events that end wudu or nullify the state of wudu in and of themselves. And we began to discuss asbab. Asbab meaning reasons, meaning nullifiers of wudu, not in and of themselves, but because they are reasons for ahdath. We mentioned, we began with ما غطى على العقل, whatever covers the mind, anything that uh, makes the man or person leave a state of consciousness, such as being drunk, such as losing consciousness, fainting, and sleep. When it comes to sleep, we mentioned the conditions of sleep, that it has to be heavy, and we define what heavy is. And then the next sabab, which we will start with now, ولمس من يلتذ به عادة إن قصد اللذة أو وجدها. So to touch men, men meaning anyone, it's a general, it's أداة عموم, it means anyone whom he or she will find pleasure with عادة, according to عادة, according to convention. What does this mean? We'll define it. إن قصد اللذة أو وجدها, meaning if pleasure is found or it is intended. So this is one of the very old points of difference between the fuqaha in the different regions of the Islamic world. Famously, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون ولا جنبا إلا عابري سبيل حتى تغتسلوا وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر أو جاء أحدكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم إن الله كان عفوا غفورا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أو لامستم النساء, or you have touched women. So he meant in Surah Al-Nisa, he mentions a list of reasons that can be reasons that nullify wudu. He says, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى, do not approach the prayer while you are in a state of drunkenness. If I can just find this page in the Sharh. And so he mentions أو جاء أحدكم من الغائط. He mentions other things. If somebody comes from, doing their business, al-gha'at meaning defecation, but it refers to both defecation and urination, because they both nullify wudu. He says, "Oh, junuban." So, if you are in a state of janaba, junuban is the adjective of the person of the plural. It's plural. Junuban, people are junub. So he mentions junub, the state of janaba, as a reason to repeat your wudu, and then later in the ayah he says, "أو لامستم النساء," or you have touched women. One side of the fuqaha took this in a very literal sense, that anyone who touches, women, um, they will have their wudu nullified. And they have their conditions. Amongst that camp, there is the discussion about what the conditions are. They say, for example, that it must be skin-on-skin contact, that it must be a non-mahram. So it can't be, it's not referring to your mother or your sister, rather, it's referring to someone who you can marry. It doesn't have to be your wife, even someone you can marry. So some accidental bump into someone in the market. And skin-to-skin contact, again, there's a lot of conditions, and this camp is mainly dominated by the Shafi'iyya and some other people from amongst the Salaf, so you can look into the details of the conditions, but generally speaking, they understood this ayah in a literal sense, that touching women in and of itself is a nullifier of wudu. The Hanafiya, went on the other side of the spectrum, and they said that لامستم النساء here refers to having intercourse. It's a euphemism. They say that it's a euphemism in the Quran because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not, generally speaking, in the Quran, euphemisms are used. Things are not always mentioned explicitly out of, it's a good rhetorical style to not mention things explicitly when it comes to, such discussions. And, there's a discussion to be had about whether or not this follows through the Quran in general. That's a whole mas'ala to be researched in usul al-fiqh. Regardless, they supplemented their view with ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, either touching women or, obviously here referring to his wives, or touching them or kissing them, and then continuing prayer or not making wudu before doing a prayer. So the two famous ahadith that are commonly used, and there's many. The first one is that the Prophet ﷺ, kissed all of his wives before going to the prayer, and that it's mentioned that he did not make wudu after this. And the second one is that when he was praying tahajjud during the night in the hujra meaning the chamber of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha. Obviously, the hujra was very small, and it's mentioned in that narration that this was during the time where they still did not have lanterns, so it was pitch dark. And so the Prophet ﷺ would go into sujood, and the foot of the Sayyidah Aisha would be there, and he would move it with his hand. And so he touched a woman during the prayer, and he continued the prayer, so it seemingly did not nullify the wudu. So these hadiths, these two hadiths mainly, and other hadiths on a secondary level, are used by the Hanafiya to supplement their view quite strongly. The Shafi'iyya also have a very important point against the Hanafiya. In the ayah, as we mentioned, first, state object. So again, the Hanafiya think that touching women in the verse is referring to intercourse. However, the Shafi'iyya point out that in the ayah, janaba is mentioned. And then later on, touching women is mentioned. They said that if touching women here is referring to intercourse, why would both of these be included in the verse? It's not good balagha. It's not fitting of the Quran to repeat something without adding any meaning. There's no point of repetition, seemingly, if these mean the exact same thing. So you have two camps that have very strong views on this. Both of them have supplemental evidence from the Sunnah. Both of them have narrations from the Sahaba. Both of them have, their understanding of the verse is linguistically valid in and of itself. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, and Imam Ahmad went into a middle path. This middle path is that touching women nullifies wudu. However, it is not a nullifier in and of itself. It is a sabab for nullifying wudu. The reason that it nullifies wudu is because if it is done with pleasure, for the intention of pleasure, then it can move the liquids in the faraj, in the front parts of either man or woman, and that, as we discussed, nullifies wudu. So the touching of women, how do we bring all of these evidences together? We know that there are sahih hadith that the Prophet ﷺ touched or kissed his woman. So how do we bring this together with the verse? There's again, janaba is mentioned, and then a second thing is mentioned. We know that there's something else. we define this something else as touching, but it has to be done with the intention of pleasure, or if pleasure is found. So we have four different scenarios. Let's draw this out. Um, so we have four scenarios, and I drew this exact diagram in al-Akhdari. So if you remember it from there, you might remember. So is pleasure found? F for found. I'm not going to write the entire thing. And is it intended? So we have yes, no, yes, and no. So if the intention of if when the woman was touched, was the intention for pleasure? If the answer is yes, then it nullifies wudu. If the answer is no, so again, if the answer is no, then we have to look at whether pleasure was found. So I didn't intend. I touched a woman and I did not intend pleasure. However, regardless of my intention, as a result, it was found. After the fact that I had touched, I felt it. If I had felt it, then it nullifies my wudu. If I did not feel it, then it does not nullify my wudu. So if the answer to either question is yes, was pleasure intended? So here, yes, if the answer to either question is yes, then it nullifies wudu. The only state in which it does not nullify wudu, if there was no intention of pleasure, so no, and pleasure was not found as a consequence. So out of the four scenarios, three of them break wudu and one of them does not. Now, when it comes to the person who was touched, generally speaking, a man will find pleasure from his spouse or, an accidental touch of a strange woman, and vice versa. So a woman will find it from her husband or from a strange man. And by strange, we mean non-mahram, so not a relative. This is the usual case. When we say here, من يلتذ به عادة, this is what we refer to. If I, as a regular man who has healthy pleasures towards women, and I touch a man, for whatever reason, pleasure is found from touching that man. Does it nullify my wudu? The answer is no, because it is not someone who is conventionally, uh, you know, by convention, you don't find pleasure. By the ada, it is not someone you find the ladha, the pleasure from. And same thing for a woman. If she's a normal woman of healthy, temperament, and she touches another woman and feels something, or even intends it, it does not break wudu. When does it break wudu? If they are not normal people. So if I am someone who, if I'm a fasiq, I'm a sinner and I find it from men. I find that pleasure from men. If that is who I am, if that is my normal temperament, then it will break my wudu. Right? So it depends on the person who is doing the thing. Just as um, a man and a woman are judged differently, it is because their temperaments are different. So everyone is judged by their normal actions and temperament. So even amongst men, if someone has a wrong direction, they have something unhealthy about their attitude and temperament, then their wudu is broken or not based on that. right? Is that understandable? That point?
Yeah, Sheikh, but does this also have to do with, like, for example, I think Sheikh Mahmoud mentions that it's mutlaqan even if like a man were to touch a mahram, even though he'd be considered a fasiq, and he'd find the ladda.
Yeah, so this applies to family as well. So if, for whatever reason, I'm not sure, I didn't hear the question, but I'm assuming this is what was asked. If um, for whatever reason I find accidental pleasure from touching a relative, it does not break wudu. However, if I am someone of a if I'm a fasiq, if I'm someone of a non-normal temperament, and I usually have that um, that feeling towards mahram people, then it will break wudu for me, right? So the ada here, the convention here, it's not just towards men or women. The health and normal behavior of the person, it's not just being judged regarding whether they're attracted to men or women or the same gender. It's also regarding whether they're attracted to maharim or non-maharim. It's also regarding whether they're, attracted to someone who is not of age, for example. So it applies to many things. Um,
Uh, Sheikh,
is,
just another question, sorry.
yes.
Um, so is there anything like could you possibly define what pleasure is in regards to ear? And also, is for example, what if the pleasure comes from after the touch, from thought or whatever? Because I remember this masala, but I just need clarification.
What's the mas'ala? The what?
That like for example, they don't feel the leather at the touch, but after the touch, if that makes sense. Possibly from thought or whatever.
Yes, so
Like the yeah,
it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be simultaneous, if that's what you're asking. If you touch someone and then 2 seconds later or 3 seconds later you feel it, yeah, that's also breaking wudu. It doesn't have to be at the same time as the touch. Now, if it's something days after, then no,
yeah, no,
yeah, that's no, that's different. It's
yeah,
it's
but
there's no like precise time limit. These are things which we call urfi. It, right? You,
yeah,
you just know it. It's the same thing as, for example, um, you know, doing wudu within it has to be consecutive. What's the definition of consecutive? It's urfi. You know if you're doing wudu disconnected or not. And they define it with something very general, like they define it with water being dried. But all these things are, you just know it. And again, it's the same answer to your first question, what is the precise definition of ladha? It's a sensation within yourself. And if you feel something and you're not sure whether it's ladha or not, uh, then it probably is. Like it's just it's not a medical term, right?
yeah,
It's not like something that appears that you can see or something that you can smell. It's just something within yourself. Um, and Allah subhanahu wa
yeah.
ta'ala knows our intentions and knows whether, some people try to, probably not anyone in this class, but some people, they try to trick themselves into getting out of ibadat, getting out of remaking wudu. But yeah,
Yes,
I think
barakallahu
that
fikum.
applies to anyone here. طيب. Anyone else about this mas'ala specifically, or what we mentioned until now?
Sheikh, do the Hanbalis have the same qawl as the Shafi'is
Yes,
in this?
no, no, Imam Ahmad followed Imam Malik in this.
So their view is similar to ours.
Yes. Now they
Ah,
might have different detailed definitions, but the general principle of how we bring these two views together, yes, they take the same middle ground. And it is, the most correct in terms of the usul al-fiqh of the mutakallimin, which is to try to bring all of the evidences together. Um, there are other, in some of the ahadith, in one of the narrations that Sayyidah Aisha mentions, she adds, when she mentions that the Prophet would kiss her or touch her before prayer, she would add the ibarah, she would add the sentence, and she's saying, he, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, was more able to hold on to his, um, not sure what the exact word is. He was able to have, but he had better self-control of his desires than any of you. She was addressing the Sahaba. She's saying, because a lot of the Sahaba, specifically in Medina, you look at the narrations in the Muwatta or the Mudawwana, a lot of the Sahaba, they seem to have the same view of Imam Shafi'i. They seem to think that you have to, um, make wudu every time you touch or feel pleasure from being touched. And the fact is, or not the fact, but what seems clear is that um, most people, generally speaking, um, if their wife is touching them in some way, they will feel something. And that's why it seems that they considered, a lot of the Sahaba there considered wudu to be broken mutlaqan, without restraint, when touching occurs. And the ibarah of the Sayyidah Aisha seems to explain this. She says that yes, kissing and touching occurred by the Prophet ﷺ, but he was able to hold on to his desires better than any of you. That's why you guys, she's not saying this directly, but what is understood, the implication is that you guys need to make wudu, but he didn't, because he was able to hold on to it. And again, the Sahaba, when they're giving the fatwa, they don't go into the same quyud, and they don't mention the ilal the same way the later Imams did. So it's not that the Sahaba of Medina were contradicted by Imam Malik, but it's more of an explanation of their
So,
narrations, which can be
so in more,
sometimes people. Yes.
so in most cases, like kissing breaks, because I remember the method mentions like three
So let's
exceptions.
get into let's talk about kissing right now. That's
Yeah,
it's its
sorry.
own. Yes. Um, so he doesn't mention. I think he mentions it out of order. It's mentioned somewhere down there. Uh, in Aqrab al-Masalik, he mentions it here. So kissing is considered in the madhab to break wudu mutlaqan. That's the statement in the book. That's not true. So why do we say mutlaqan? And it's because when you kiss your spouse, regardless of on the lips or on the hand or whatever, um, unlike, an accidental nudge with the elbow or, bumping into the knees, kissing in and of itself is considered an intimate action by its very nature. It's not like other forms of touch. And that's why it's considered to break wudu all the time, because it's considered by its nature and by the way it is used by humans, it's considered to be intimate in and of itself. So it's not plausible to do it. It's not plausible for normal people to do it without feeling something, whether they intend it or not. They have to intend it or feel it. 99% of the cases, right? And again, asbab, we mentioned asbab here, they don't have to occur just because they nullify wudu because they might stir desires. Again, we mentioned it doesn't have to happen. The same way sleeping breaks wudu because it might make you pass gas. It doesn't matter if you pass gas or not. Sleeping breaks wudu. So yes, kissing. Yes, it's possible that in some scenarios you can kiss someone without feeling something, but it's considered such a low probability that we just say kissing breaks wudu mutlaqan. However, as I said, the statement is not true. There is technically two exceptions. The first exception is if it is being done as a farewell. If you're traveling, um, whether short term or long term, whatever, uh, if a kiss is done for that purpose as a goodbye, then that is considered one of the examples in which um, it is not intimate in and of itself. It has a secondary purpose. So if it happens as a farewell or a goodbye, uh, in that case, it would be treated as a normal touch. You would look at whether pleasure is found or not. But it does not break mutlaqan, unlike a normal kiss. The second exception is if it is done out of pity, meaning, uh, I don't know, your wife is crying because, I don't know, she lost a sentimental item and you kiss it to make her feel better. That, again, that is considered an exception. That is done for a secondary purpose. It's not the main purpose of it, of kissing. So farewells and kisses out of pity or to make someone feel better, those two um, are considered exceptions. So technically, kissing does not break mutlaqan in a literal sense, but 99% of the time, a kiss would break wudu. Uh, in whatever context it is done, wherever pleasure is, regardless of whether pleasure is found or not, or whether it's tended or not, except those two scenarios we mentioned, in which case it will be treated as a normal touch, just like the rules we went over up until now. Wait, I didn't expect us to do the entire class on this. I thought we would mention the second mas'ala as well, but we only have 7 minutes. And it's also a mas'ala that requires some time. So we will just stop it here. I'm still open to questions if you have any for this class. Otherwise, we will wrap up for today, inshallah.
Sheikh, do you know when they mentioned the ha'il? When they mentioned the ha'il,
Who? In what scenario?
well, the general term in the madhab, I mean, not the Sheikh in Tadrib al-Salik specifically. Like when they say ha'il bila adam, like ha'il kal adam, like a ha'il that's really like thin. Does that break wudu or not?
In what case? In touching a
Uh,
woman? Or,
in touching like يعني الذكر أو
oh yeah,
yeah
well, that's what that's why I wanted to mention. There's a whole thing to go on to
uh,
with the but yeah, generally speaking, it's again, it's very urfi. It's usually defined as whether you can see the color of the skin through it, or whether the heat is mentioned. But generally speaking, most clothes, modern clothes, actual clothes, that people normally wear is it's considered a hat. The only thing that you could be considered an exception is something that's very thin, like I don't even know what it would be called in English. It's like I think they call it sheath. It's like a very, very thin thing. It's basically like, look, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can see the color of your skin, then that's not generally considered a hat. Any normal clothes, whether it's cotton or fabric, whether it's light or heavy, uh, it's it's generally not something to worry about. I think again, you'll know if you're wearing normal clothes or not.
yeah.
Yeah. If nobody else has any more questions, we will continue with this next mas'ala on Monday. It is Saturday, yes. Yeah, we'll continue on Monday, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
بارك
And
الله فيكم.
Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام.